Today, this video would show the interface for a CX3324A current device waveform analyzer and measurements using a Bluetooth board that we have. So just a full description here, we have channel 1 connected to a CX1101A current sensor, and channel 2 is connected to a CX1151A passive probe adapter for voltage measurements. So the CX3324A would have detected both channels, so channel 1 for current and channel 2 for voltage measurements. So now to begin with, we would now go ahead and change some settings. So I've started the advertising the Bluetooth signals. You might see a little flicker, but because we don't have the right setup, we're not able to see the right signal levels. So let's go ahead and change the channel 1 settings that I have here. Let's start this with 10 milliamps. And let's keep it as that. Now let's look at channel 2. It's definitely not at 20 volts. I'll bring this down to about 1 volt. And that would be about right. You could see the change in levels, but I've not set my horizontal, my time-based settings. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's take a look at 200 milliseconds. And if I turn on the signal now, we should be able to see the pulses. This is great, but I might not be able to characterize the pulse exactly. So I might want to try capturing not just the periodic advertisements. I might want to actually capture the advertising waveform. So to do that, let's now tweak the trigger settings. So if we go to trigger and do trigger, I would like to trigger on channel 1 with a positive edge, so that's been set. Now it's not at 1 M, so let's change this to about 12 milliamps. And let's close that. Now with that then, I would have to readjust the time-based setting. Let's bring this down to 1 millisecond. So you can start to see the shape of that pulse. So let's have a look here. Is it 1 millisecond? It should be. And this is where we can see the pulses. That might have been a little quick, so now I'll go back to channel 1 setting and change this to 12 milliamps. And instead of leaving this as auto, I'll just leave it at that. And we should now be able to see the signal. I shall turn the signal on. And as you can see, it's flickering around a bit. And that's possibly because I need this to be triggered. Instead of running on auto, this would be triggered. So now it's a little more stable. And I can then see some a much different pulse. Instead of just one pulse, one quick pulse like in the beginning, I could actually see when it wakes, and over time it starts triggering higher currents across that. Now this might still be too tiny and you might want to split the waveforms, so we can go ahead and under waveforms on the right hand corner here, we could do dual waveforms, and I can then bring the voltage measurements down. Now that I'm here, I might want to just tweak the voltage to something in the milliamps range, and perhaps set this to 2 volts where it would be a little more obvious. And there you go. You can clearly see the different measurements around us, the waveforms, the behavior of it. And you can go ahead and do some measurements on the different waveforms and characterize the measurements. So what I like to do now is then to just do a zoom on the wake up of the current. So let's turn off the voltage measurement for now. And instead of doing dual waveforms, I'll do a zoom. So the zoom area is automatically prompted. So now if I were to just drag this box a little lower or readjust this box, you'll be able to see the signals a little better just at the wake up section of it. So you can actually see that spike up there. Um, and with that, this is a quick way of checking your wave from sleep to awake measurements. So let's just move away from that and just say I might want to check out the width measurements that's here. So I'm interested to know what the width measurements is across this. We could go ahead and do measurement width and just drop it on this. You'll give it a little time depending on your waveform. It might take a little while, but this was a relatively quick one. Small with it's only about 1.6 microseconds. And so there you go. You'll have the measurements you need. So you could add as you go along and have those measurements shown here. Now, there's another thing called an area. So you might be interested to check out across this pulse what the current consumption is. So this is area. I could just load this here. And again, I'm just going to widen this to the areas that I'm interested in, and the measurements automatically prompted down here. So this is one quick way for you to get some measurements done. And of course, there are a couple of others that you could look in and explore. So the next thing that I would just like to show would be profiling the waveform. So let's go to analysis. There are a couple of things here. We did look at area. We can now look into profiler. So if I load this, it will automatically prompt the power and current profiler. I only have the current waveform turned on, so it would attempt to profile the current waveform that I have. Let's turn on Auto Profiler if this is not something you're familiar with. So these are the few setups that you could play around with or tweak around to match the profiling. So I'll go ahead and hit Perform, and you could now see the different segments we have. There's about 20 of them. And if you go into each one, it'll tell you what it is. You can adjust them, move the segments up and down if you want. But this is just a quick way of how you can profile your waveforms for future work. So let's close this now. The one last item I'll probably like to do is then let me just turn off the area measurement, and that would be data logging. So if you notice here, we are in the scope section. To turn on data logging, you'll have to go into the data logger tab. And this is the few setups that you'll have to work on. So the start condition for recording, and there's a way to check your max sampling rate based on your setup. and what the estimate file size would be so that you could prepare what space, the memory space you would need for data logging, and obviously point to the storage area that you like the file to be saved. So these are the start conditions that you could change. Um, and then obviously you could go into triggering if you like that to be part of your data logging setup. So earlier we had it as a positive edge slope to trigger, so that's one way we could keep it. Um, we also have Waveform Database, so where it'll be, and then you have playback that you could link to. So if you turn this on, um, and then playback controls, this would, you could set the intervals if you want to have it on repeat, and re-triggering. So that's the few things you can do in data logging. And so once you have that saved, you could always load the data log file. So let's do a load here. This was previously saved. So I could load this file. So if it's a huge file, it might take a while to load, but this wasn't a huge file. I had left the arrow marker on when this was recorded, so that's the reason why you could see it there. You could hit play, and because I know I didn't have the signal triggered too much later in the file, I'm just going to drag it to where you could possibly see it. And that's the data logging example that I have. So that's all I have for today. Thanks for watching.